Rain tapped softly against the small kitchen window as Elena stood staring at the last 2 eggs in the refrigerator. She closed the door slowly, as if even the sound might break the fragile balance of her life. Just 3 months ago, her home had been filled with laughter. Her husband Daniel used to hum while fixing things around the house. Even after long workdays, he never forgot to ask, "Did you eat?" before serving himself. Their little apartment was far from perfect, but it was warm, alive with hope, until the day everything changed. The day the world fell silent. Daniel had collapsed at work. At first, Elena thought it was exhaustion. He had been coughing for weeks, but insisted it was nothing serious. "Just a stubborn cold," he would say with a tired smile. But the call from the hospital shattered that illusion. By the time she arrived, Daniel lay pale and motionless, tubes surrounding him. Machines beeped in steady rhythms that felt louder than thunder. The doctor's voice was calm but heavy. "His condition is critical. Treatment must begin immediately." Elena barely understood the medical terms. All she heard was one terrifying truth. Her husband might not survive without expensive care. Her knees trembled, but she refused to fall. "Do whatever you must," she whispered. "Please save him." The first bill, the number printed on the hospital bill, looked unreal, like 2. Many zeros had been added by mistake, but it was no mistake. Elena sold her small gold necklace that very evening. It had been a wedding gift from her mother, something she had promised never to part with. As the jeweler counted the money into her shaking hands, she felt as though she was selling a piece of her past. Yet she didn't cry. "Not yet. There will be more bills," the doctor warned gently. Elena nodded. She would face them all. A life rewritten overnight. Soon her days found a new rhythm. Morning began before sunrise. She cleaned houses, scrubbing floors until her fingers burned, washing dishes until her back ached. By afternoon, she rushed to the hospital, forcing a smile before stepping into Daniel's room. "You look tired," he would whisper weakly. "Slept well?" She lied every single time at night. She returned home only to calculate expenses, skipping meals so she could stretch every coin. Sleep became a stranger, but love kept her standing. The promise she made one evening. Daniel opened his eyes after a long silence. "Selena," he breathed. She leaned closer, gripping his hand carefully. If I don't make it, don't say that," she interrupted, her voice trembling yet firm. Tears gathered in his eyes. "You deserve a better life than this struggle." Elena pressed his hand against her cheek. "You are my life," she whispered, "and I am not letting you go." It was not just a promise, it was a decision. When strength was the only choice, as weeks passed, Elena took on more work. She washed laundry for neighbors. She ironed clothes late into the night. She even repaired torn garments, though she had never learned sewing properly. Blisters formed on her hands, but she hid them inside her pockets whenever she visited the hospital. One afternoon, while mopping a marble floor in a stranger's mansion, dizziness overtook her. She had not eaten in nearly 2 days. The homeowner noticed her pale face. "Sit down," the woman insisted. "I'm fine," Elena replied automatically, but her body betrayed her, and she collapsed onto a chair. When asked why she pushed herself so hard, Elena simply said, "My husband needs me." No further explanation was necessary. The loneliest walk hospitals are strange places at night. The corridors grow quiet, yet worry echoes louder than footsteps. Elena often sat beside Daniel long after visiting hours ended, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Sometimes she spoke to him about ordinary things, the weather, a funny memory, the neighbor's noisy dog, anything to keep hope alive. Other times, she just held his hand in silence. Fear lived inside her, but she never allowed it to show, because if she broke, who would hold them together? The choice no one should make. One morning, the doctor called her into his office. "There is a treatment that could improve his chances," he explained carefully, "but it is very costly." Elena didn't even ask the amount. "When do we start?" she said. That night, she packed away her remaining valuables, her phone, her wedding ring, even the warm blanket her grandmother had stitched years ago. Each item carried memories. Each memory whispered, "Keep it." But love answered louder, "Save him." When the ring left her finger, a quiet tear finally escaped. Still, she did not hesitate. A flicker of hope. Days later, Daniel showed small signs of improvement. He spoke more clearly. He even managed a faint smile. "You shouldn't be working so hard," he murmured once. She laughed softly. "Rest. That's your only job." But inside, exhaustion had begun to settle deep in her bones. Sometimes, while sitting beside him, her eyes closed without warning. At the moment she felt his fingers move, she woke instantly. Love had trained her heart to remain alert. The storm grows stronger. Just when Elena believed the worst had passed, complications appeared. Another procedure. Another bill. Another mountain to climb. For the first time, doubt crept into her thoughts. How much more could she endure? That night, rain poured relentlessly as she walked home. Soaked and shivering, she stopped beneath a flickering streetlight and allowed herself 1 minute to cry, just one. Then she wiped her face and continued forward, because tomorrow still needed Her courage. An unexpected kindness one afternoon at the hospital. An elderly janitor noticed her struggling to stay awake. "You remind me of my late wife," he said gently. "She fought for me the same way." The next day, he handed her a small envelope. Inside was a modest amount of money. "I know it isn't much," he said, "but sometimes even a candle can push back the dark." Elena tried to refuse, but he insisted. For the first time in months, she felt something warm that wasn't fear. Kindness still existed, and it gave her strength to wait. She never shared. Friends occasionally told her, "You must think about yourself too." But how could she? Every breath Daniel took felt tied to her effort, so she carried her pain quietly. She smiled when speaking to him. She laughed when he worried. She became his courage. Even when hers was fading, love, she learned, is not always loud. Sometimes it is the silent decision to stay, no matter how heavy the burden becomes. A whisper in the darkness late one night. Daniel stirred and looked at her with fragile awareness. "Why are you still here?" he asked softly. She brushed his hair back. "Because this is where my heart is." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry you have to suffer because of me." Elena shook her head immediately. "This is not suffering," she said. "This is love." The machines continued their steady rhythm. Outside, dawn slowly approached, painting the sky with fragile light. Elena watched it through the window and realized something. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. Not because life was easy, but because love refused to let her surrender no matter how long the night lasted. She would carry every burden alone if it meant Daniel could see another morning. Winter arrived quietly. But for Elena, the cold felt harsher than ever before. The hospital windows fogged each morning, and she would trace small circles on the glass while watching the world outside continue as if nothing had changed. People laughed, rushed to work, argued on phones, living ordinary lives. Meanwhile, hers had narrowed into a single mission: keep Daniel alive. The bills that never stopped coming. Just when she managed to pay one hospital bill, another appeared, thicker, heavier, more frightening. The doctor explained that Daniel's lungs were weaker than expected. Infection had spread faster than they hoped. "He is fighting," the doctor said gently, "but he needs more support." Support meant medicine. Medicine meant money. Money meant Elena had to work harder than her exhausted body believed possible. So she added another job, cleaning a small restaurant after it closed. Grease clung to her hands no matter how many times she washed them. By the time she finished each night, the streets were empty and silent. Walking home alone became routine. Fear no longer mattered. Only time did. The day her strength nearly broke. One afternoon, Elena was polishing a staircase when her vision blurred. The world tilted slightly. She grabbed the railing before she could fall. "You look terrible," the homeowner said bluntly. "Are you even eating?" Elena forced a smile. "I'm fine." But the truth followed her like a shadow. She had been surviving mostly on tea and leftover bread. Food felt like a luxury she could not afford. Every coin had a purpose. Every sacrifice had a name. Daniel. A small lie. A big love. When she visited the hospital that evening, Daniel noticed her trembling hands. "You're cold?" he whispered. "It's just the weather," she replied quickly. He studied her face for a long moment. "You're losing weight." She laughed softly, brushing it aside. "And you're becoming too observant." But inside, guilt twisted painfully. She didn't want him to know the price she was paying. If he worried, his recovery might slow. So she became an actress, performing strength she didn't always feel, the sound she feared most. 3 nights later, a sharp alarm pierced the quiet hospital corridor. Nurses rushed past her. Her heart froze. The sound was coming from Daniel's room. For a moment, her legs refused to move. Then instinct carried her forward. "Please wait outside," a nurse urged as doctors surrounded his bed. The door closed. Elena stood there, staring at the handle as if it might vanish. Minutes stretched into something unbearable. She pressed her palms together and whispered the only prayer her trembling mind could form. "Please, give her more time. Not wealth, not comfort, just time between fear and relief." After what felt like forever, the doctor stepped out. "We stabilized him," he said. Elena's knees weakened with relief, but his condition is still very delicate. "The next few days are critical." Critical. The word echoed loudly in her chest. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. That night, she didn't leave his side even when visiting hours ended. Sitting in the dim light, she watched every breath he took as if her gaze alone could protect him. Memories that refused to fade to keep herself from drowning in fear. Elena began telling Daniel stories from their past. "Remember the day we got lost looking for our first apartment?" she said softly. His lips curved faintly. "You refused to ask for directions, and you refused to admit we were lost," she teased. For a moment, the hospital room felt less like a battlefield and more like home. She realized something important then. Illness could weaken the body, but it could not erase love. A letter. She never meant to write one particularly lonely night. Elena found herself unable to sleep. She borrowed a pen from the nurse's station and tore a blank page from an old notebook under the soft glow of a hallway lamp. She began to write. "If someday you read this, I want you to know that loving you has been the greatest honor of my life. None of these sacrifices feel heavy because they are carrying the person who gave my world meaning. A tear slipped onto the paper, smudging the ink. She quickly folded the letter and hid it in her bag. It wasn't goodbye. She refused to think of it that way. It was simply her heart, placed into words when the world felt too quiet. Days blended together until Elena could no longer remember what rest felt like. Yet something unexpected began to happen. Hospital staff started recognizing her. The nurses greeted her warmly. One even saved her a cup of soup each evening. You need strength too, the nurse insisted. Elena accepted it with grateful eyes. Sometimes kindness arrives not as grand gestures but as small reminders that you are not completely alone. Daniel's greatest fear one morning. Daniel seemed more awake than usual. His voice, though weak, carried urgency. Elena, promise me something. Anything. If my treatment becomes too much, too expensive, don't destroy your life for me. Her heart clenched painfully. Don't ask me that, she whispered. I can't bear the thought of you suffering. She held his hand tighter. Listen to me, she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. A life without you would be the real suffering. Tears gathered in his eyes. In that fragile moment, neither spoke again. They didn't need to. Love often lives in silence. The breaking point, another bill, arrived the following week, larger than any before. Elena stared at it until the numbers blurred. For the first time, fear whispered a dangerous question. What if I can't save him? She stepped outside the hospital, the cold air biting her cheeks. Cars rushed past, people moved quickly. The world showed no sign of slowing for her pain. A sob rose in her throat, but she swallowed it back. She had allowed herself many sacrifices, but not surrender. Never surrender. A decision in the dark that night. Elena returned to their apartment and looked around slowly. The sofa where they watched movies, a tiny dining table. Daniel insisted on fixing instead of replacing the curtains. They chose together after hours of debate. Every corner held a memory, yet by morning, she made a choice few could imagine. She would give up the apartment, sell what little remained, move into a single rented room if she had to. Home was not walls. Home was Daniel, breathing, a flicker that refused to die. Next evening brought something. She had almost forgotten how to feel hope. Daniel managed to sit up slightly with assistance. His breathing, though still strained, seemed steadier. You see, she said gently, you're stronger than you think. He looked at her with quiet wonder. No, you are. She shook her head. We are, she corrected. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a real smile. Not the brave one, not the pretend one. A true smile, but alive. As Elena walked out of the hospital that night, the sky shimmered. With distant stars, she realized that strength isn't about never feeling tired. It is about rising again and again, even when exhaustion lives in your bones. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, her love still burned brighter than fear. But life was preparing a test far greater than anything she had faced so far. Spring began to touch the city, but Elena barely noticed the changing season. Days were no longer measured by sunlight or darkness. They were counted by Daniel's breathing, by the numbers on hospital monitors, by the fragile hope that tomorrow might be kinder than today. For a short while things seemed stable. Daniel could speak in longer sentences. Sometimes he even asked about the outside world. What do the mornings look like now? He once whispered. Elena smiled softly. The trees are starting to bloom. He closed his eyes, imagining it. I want to see that, he said quietly. You will, she replied without hesitation. Though fear flickered deep inside her chest, she had learned something through all this pain. Hope is sometimes a promise you make even when you are terrified it might break. The call that froze her blood one afternoon, while scrubbing dishes at the restaurant. Elena's phone vibrated violently in her pocket. It was the hospital. Her hands began shaking before she even answered. Please come immediately, the nurse said. His condition has suddenly worsened. For a moment, the world went silent. The plate slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, but she didn't stop to apologize. She ran, still wearing her apron, her hair untied, soap clinging to her hands. Every second felt stolen from Daniel. Every breath burned. When she reached the hospital, doctors were already rushing around his bed. The machines blinked urgently. The steady rhythm she had grown used to was now chaotic. What's happening? She cried. The doctor spoke quickly but gently. Severe complications. We're doing everything we can. Everything we can. The words were meant to comfort, yet they terrified her. Waiting outside the door once again, Elena found herself staring at a closed hospital room. Spit this time felt different. Heavier, as if fate itself stood on the other side. She slid down the wall and wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the trembling. Memories flooded her mind without permission. Daniel laughing in the rain. Daniel burning their first dinner and pretending it tasted perfect. Daniel whispering, as long as we have each other, we have enough. Please, she whispered into the empty corridor. Don't take him from me. Hours passed before the doctor finally stepped out. His expression alone made her heart sink. He needs to be moved to the intensive care unit, he said. The next 48 hours are critical. Critical. The word returned like a storm. She could not escape the price of survival. Then came another truth. There is an advanced treatment that might help him, the doctor explained carefully, but it is extremely expensive. Elena didn't ask the cost right away. She already knew it would be more than she had. How long do I have to arrange it? She asked quietly. Very little time. Fear wrapped around her ribs so tightly she could barely breathe, yet her answer came without hesitation. Start the treatment. With the payment, I will find a way. She didn't know how, but love does not wait for certainty. It moves forward anyway, selling the last piece of her past that night. Elena returned to what used to be their apartment. Most of it was already empty. Only one thing remained, carefully hidden in a small box beneath the bed, a silver bracelet Daniel had given her on their first anniversary. She picked it up slowly. I wanted to give you something that lasts forever, he had said back then. Her fingers trembled as she fastened it around her wrist one last time. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to remember the girl she once was, carefree, hopeful, certain that life would be gentle. Then she removed it. At the pawn shop, the owner examined it under bright light. It's valuable, he admitted. Elena nodded, though her vision blurred, as she walked out holding the money. Her wrist felt unbearably light, but her heart felt stronger, because Daniel still had a chance. When the strong finally braked late that night, Elena sat beside Daniel in the ICU. He was unconscious, surrounded by machines that breathed and pulsed for him. The sight pierced her as she reached for his hand carefully. It was colder than she remembered. I'm still here, she whispered. For weeks, no months, she had been unshakable. But now, something inside her cracked. Tears fell silently onto the hospital blanket. I'm trying so hard, she choked. Please, don't leave me alone in this world. It was the first time she allowed him to see her tears, even if he could not open his eyes. Strength is not the absence of breaking. Sometimes, strength is simply breaking, and still refusing to walk away. A stranger's unexpected gift. The following morning, Elena sat in the waiting area, too drained to move. A middle-aged man approached hesitantly. Are you Daniel's wife? He asked. She nodded weakly. I worked with him for years, the man continued. He once helped me when my family was struggling, never asked for anything in return. He handed her an envelope. Inside was money, far more than she expected. We collected it at work, he said softly. It isn't enough for everything, but good people should never fight alone. Elena tried to speak, but emotion stole her voice, so she bowed her head, tears slipping freely in a world that had felt unbearably cold. Kindness arrived like the first ray of dawn, a whisper between worlds that evening. Something remarkable happened. Daniel's fingers moved, just slightly. Elena. The faintest sound escaped his lips. She leaned forward instantly. Amir. His eyes opened halfway, unfocused but searching. He's still smiling, he murmured weakly. Her throat tightened. Peace, you're still fighting. He studied her face, as if memorizing it. You look tired. She laughed softly through tears. Then recover quickly so you can take care of me again. For the smallest moment, his lips curved on hope. Fragile but will return, the doctor's warning the next day. The doctor spoke with unusual seriousness. He is very fragile. Even if he survives this phase, recovery will be long and uncertain. Uncertain. That Elena had grown used to that word. Still, she answered calmly. As long as there is a chance, we keep going. The doctor looked at her with quiet admiration. I have rarely seen devotion like yours, he admitted. She shook her head gently. This is simply what love looks like. The edge of tomorrow. That night, Elena stepped outside the hospital for a breath of fresh air. The sky stretched endlessly above her, scattered with quiet stars. For the first time in months, she realized something profound. She was no longer afraid of hardship. She was only afraid of a world without Daniel in it. Pulling her thin shawl tighter, she whispered into the night, I will carry every burden, as long as you keep breathing. Behind her, machines continued their steady song. Ahead of her, fate was still unwritten. But one truth had become unshakable. Love had turned an ordinary woman into someone stronger than she had ever imagined. And yet, the greatest test of her heart was still approaching. The days that followed felt like walking on the edge of a fragile dream. Daniel was still alive, but barely. Every breath he took seemed borrowed, as if time itself was lending him moments it could reclaim at any second. Elena rarely left the hospital now. The nurses had grown used to seeing her curled up in a chair beside his bed, her head resting near his arm, waking at the slightest movement. Exhaustion had settled deep into her bones, yet her heart refused to slow down. Love had become her only fuel. The news that stole the air from her lungs one gray morning. The doctor called her into his office again. His face carried the kind of seriousness she had learned to fear. We've done everything possible with the current treatment, he began gently, but his organs are growing weaker without a major procedure. He may not survive. Elena gripped the edge of the chair. What kind of procedure? The doctor paused before answering. A transplant? The word echoed loudly in her ears. It sounded both like hope and like a mountain too high to climb. There is one more difficulty, he continued. Finding a compatible donor quickly is rare, and the cost is extremely high. For a moment, the room spun around her. How much time does he have? She whispered. Not much. 3 simple words. Yet they shattered whatever fragile calm she had left. Searching for miracles from that day forward, Elena lived in constant motion. She spoke to charities, filled out assistance forms, knocked on office doors, made phone calls, until her voice turned hoarse. Some people listened kindly but could not help. Others simply said, "We're sorry." Sorry, such a small word, yet so unbearably heavy. Still, she refused to stop, because somewhere inside her burned a stubborn belief. Miracles sometimes appear only after you refuse to give up. When Daniel learned the truth despite everyone's efforts to shield him, Daniel eventually sensed tension. One evening, his weak voice broke the silence. "Tell me what the doctor said." Elena tried to smile. "Nothing you need to worry about." He looked at her with surprising firmness. "Elena, please, don't hide my own life from me." Her eyes filled instantly. "They want to do a transplant," she admitted softly. He closed his eyes for a long moment. "That must cost a fortune." She said nothing. That silence told him everything. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye. "No," he whispered. "We can't do this. I won't let you destroy your future for me." Her heart clenched. "There is no future for me without you," she replied. "You deserve laughter again, not endless struggle." She leaned closer, her voice trembling. "Yet unbreakable. Daniel, listen to me. When we promised in sickness and in health, I meant every word. Loving you was never a burden." For the first time, he began to cry openly, not from pain, but from the overwhelming weight of being loved so deeply. The answer hidden in her blood. Days later, the hospital began testing potential donors. Friends volunteered. 2 distant relatives came forward. None were compatible. Hope flickered dangerously. Then a nurse approached Elena. "Have you considered getting tested?" She blinked in surprise. "Me?" "It's possible for spouses to match sometimes." The idea struck her like lightning. Within hours, she completed the tests. The waiting felt endless. Every tick of the clock sounded louder than the last. Finally, the doctor called her in. "You are a match." For a second, she couldn't breathe. A match. She pressed a trembling hand to her lips as relief washed over hers with powerful, overwhelming. But the doctor's expression remained cautious. "This surgery carries risks for both of you," he explained. "Recovery will be difficult. You must think carefully." Think carefully. Her answer had already formed in her heart long before this moment arrived. "When do we begin?" she asked. A decision made of love. That night, Elena sat beside Daniel, watching him sleep. The soft hospital light traced the tired lines on his face. He looked older than his years now, worn by battles he never chose. She gently brushed his hair back. "You once told me," she whispered, "that love means protecting each other. Now it's my turn." She didn't tell him about the match. No. Yet she knew he would refuse, and this was one decision she could not allow him to make. The letter before dawn, unable to sleep. Elena borrowed a pen again. Her hands trembled as she wrote. "If someday you wake and I am not beside you, don't let grief follow you. Every moment with you has been worth more than a lifetime of ordinary days. Loving you has been my greatest blessing." A tear fell onto the paper. She folded the letter carefully and gave it to the nurse. "Please, only give this to him if something happens to me." The nurse's eyes glistened, but she nodded. In that quiet exchange lived a courage few would ever understand. When he found out the secret did not stay hidden for long. Doctors are careful, but hospitals have a way of letting truth slip through small cracks. When Daniel learned she was the donor, his reaction was immediate. "No." His weak voice carried surprising force. "I won't allow it." She held his hand firmly. "You don't get to allow it or refuse it," she said softly. "Your life matters more than mine." Her eyes filled, yet her voice stayed steady. "How can you say that? My life is you." He shook his head desperately. "What if I lose you?" She smiled through tears. "You won't." But what if she placed her fingers gently over his lips? "And I will have spent my last days saving the man who gave my life meaning. There is no tragedy in that." He broke down completely. Their tears fell together. Silent promises flowed between them. The night before surgery, the hospital felt unusually still. Even the machines seemed quieter, as if respecting the gravity of what tomorrow would bring. Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Was she afraid? Yes, but beneath the fear lived something stronger. Peace. She had done everything love could ask of her. Across the room, Daniel watched her. "I wish I had given you an easier life," he whispered. Turned toward him. "He gave me a beautiful one." He managed a faint smile. "If we get through this, I want to see those blooming trees you told me about." Her eyes shimmered anew. They reached for each other's hands, holding on as if their touch alone could guide them safely into morning. Outside, the first light of dawn slowly crept across the sky. Tomorrow would demand everything from them. And yet, neither considered turning back. Because sometimes love is not just about standing beside someone in the storm. Sometimes it is about becoming their shelter. The morning of the surgery arrived quietly, almost too gently for a day that carried so much weight. Sunlight filtered through the hospital windows, painting the pale walls with soft gold. It was the kind of morning that usually promised new beginnings, but for Elena and Daniel, it felt like standing at the edge of an unknown world. Nurses moved efficiently through the corridors. Doctors reviewed charts. Machines hummed with quiet purpose, and in the middle of it all were two hearts bound by love, preparing to risk everything for one another. The walk that felt like goodbye as the nurses came to wheel Elena toward the operating room. Daniel reached out with trembling fingers. "Wait," he whispered. She stepped closer immediately. For a moment neither spoke. Words suddenly felt too small for everything they carried inside. Then Daniel said softly, "If I could trade places with you, I would." She smiled, though tears shimmered. In her eyes, "You already have given me more than enough." His voice broke, I'm afraid. Elena placed his hand against her cheek. "So am I," she admitted. "But fear doesn't mean we stop. It means what we have is worth fighting for." A tear slid down his temple. "I don't know how I became so lucky." She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. Live, no matter what happens. Live a life filled with the love we built together." He nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening his throat as the nurses gently guided her away. Their hands slipped apart. Daniel watched until she disappeared behind the swinging doors. It was the longest separation they had ever known. Hours that felt like forever. Time moved strangely in hospital waiting rooms for Daniel. Every second stretched endlessly. He stared at the clock so long that its ticking seemed louder than his own heartbeat. Memories flooded him without mercy. The first time he saw Elena laughing under a streetlight. The tiny kitchen where they danced while dinner burned. The nights they stayed awake planning a future they thought was guaranteed. She gave up everything. "For me," he whispered to himself. Regret washed over him, not because of her sacrifice, but because he wished he had given her even more joy while he had the chance. "Please let her be safe," he murmured again and again. Behind the operating room doors, doctors worked with intense focus. The surgery was complex. Every movement had to be precise. Every decision mattered. Outside, clouds gathered slowly, dimming the sunlight as if the sky itself held its breath. Hours passed, then more hours. Daniel's strength was fading, but he refused to rest. Not today, not while Elena was fighting for both of them. The moment that stopped the world finally. The operating room doors opened. A doctor stepped out. Daniel tried to stand but nearly collapsed. A nurse helped steady him. "Well," he asked, his voice barely audible. The doctor's serious expression softened. The surgery was successful. A second, Daniel simply stared, unable to process the words. Successful, alive, safe, Emotion crashed over him so suddenly that tears blurred his vision. "Can I see her?" he asked. "She is still unconscious." "But yes." Briefly. Seeing her again when Daniel was wheeled into her recovery room, his breath caught. Elena lay pale and still, yet peaceful. For the first time in months, the machines around them sounded calm instead of urgent. He reached for her hand carefully. It was warm. "You kept your promise," he whispered, tears slipping freely. "You've stayed." His voice trembled as he continued. "How do I ever repay a love like yours?" Her fingers twitched faintly, as though even in sleep she recognized his touch. In that quiet room, Daniel understood something with perfect clarity. What had been given another life, and it now belonged not just to him, but to the woman who saved it. The awakening late that evening. Elena's eyes fluttered open. The world was blurry at first. Then she saw him. "Daniel," she breathed weakly. He leaned closer instantly. "I'm right here." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "You made it." He let out a soft emotional laugh. "No, you made it possible." Tears rolled down both their faces, no longer only from pain, but from overwhelming relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, hope no longer seemed fragile. It felt real. Learning to begin again. Recovery was slow, painful at times. Both had scars, now physical reminders of the battle. They survived, but day by day, strength returned. Daniel took his first careful steps down the hospital hallway with Elena beside him. Weeks later, they finally walked outside together. The air smelled fresh. Trees swayed gently, covered in blossoms. Daniel looked around in quiet wonder. "You were right," he said softly. "The trees are beautiful." Elena smiled. "I told you you'd see them." He turned toward her, emotion shining in his eyes. "I see everything differently now. Every breath feels like a gift, because it came from you." She squeezed his hand. "Then promise me something. Anything. Don't waste this second chance." "I won't," he said firmly. A home rebuilt with love. They no longer had their old apartment. Most of their possessions were gone. But strangely, neither felt poor. They rented a tiny room filled with sunlight. There was only space for a small bed, a table, and 2 chairs. But it felt warmer than any place they had lived before, because they were together some evenings. They sat quietly watching the sunset. Other nights, they spoke about simple dreams, planting flowers, cooking meals, maybe someday helping others who faced battles like theirs. Their future looked different now. softer, more grateful, more aware that happiness often hides inside ordinary moments. The truths everyone began to see. Friends, neighbors, even hospital staff spoke about Elena's courage, but she always shook her head. I only did what love asked of me. Yet her story traveled quietly from heart to heart, reminding people of a powerful truth. Love is not measured in grand words. It is measured in what we are willing to give when the person we cherish needs us most. The letter that was never needed. Months later, while organizing her bag, Elena found the letter she had written before the surgery. She stared at it for a long moment, then Daniel gently took it from her hands. May I? She hesitated, then nodded. After reading it, his eyes filled with tears. You were ready to give up everything, he whispered. She touched his cheek softly. There was never anything to give up. You are my everything. He folded the letter carefully and held it close. No, he said. You are mine. A love that endured the storm one golden evening. As they walked slowly beneath blooming trees, Daniel stopped Elena. He said quietly, people often speak of heroes as if they belong only in stories. She looked at him curiously. But one married one. She shook her head with a shy smile. I'm not a hero. He lifted her hand gently. You carried every burden alone and never let me fall. If that isn't heroism, what is? She leaned against him, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, the sound she had fought so hard to protect. After everything they had endured, one truth remained brighter than ever. Real love does not disappear in hardship. It grows stronger, braver, unbreakable. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of hope, Elena realized something at last. The storm had been merciless. The road had been cruel. But love never let them go.